Tuesday, Fenway Rundown, September 23rd, one of our final Fenway Rundowns of the regular season either way. Back in the respective home offices here, Chris Cotillo and Sean McAdam. Chris Smith, the intrepid, wonderful Chris Smith, is north of the border tonight, and we'll have you covered in Toronto for the next 3 days. And then the Red Sox come home for their final three-game homestand against the Tigers Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. 6 games, 6 days, everything on the line. That's not being dramatic as the Red Sox re-enter play after a Monday off day in just about the same spot they have been in over the course of the last 5 or 6 days. The lead in the wild card is 1 game over Cleveland and Houston. They have the tiebreaker over both of those teams, which is going to potentially play a big role. Detroit could be in the mix because Cleveland's playing Detroit, and the Central is up for grabs. Seattle just swept Houston. The Yankees have a big lead, relatively, for that first spot in the wild card. We were just talking before we started rolling about a week from today where we're going to be. The possibilities are virtually endless. There's 6 cities, including Boston, whether they play or not, that we could be in. But for now, it is hold on for dear lifetime and enjoy the show.
Yeah, it's fun last week, and there are close races in both leagues. You've got Cincinnati catching up to the Mets in the National League for that last wild card spot. You've still got some seeding issues in terms of the division winners over there, but most of the fun is in the American League, where very little has been sewn up, other than the Blue Jays know they're going to the postseason. Everybody else, the Yankees are obviously in very good position to clinch pretty quickly. I would think that 3 game lead over the Red Sox is sufficient enough that the Red Sox will not gain home field over the Yankees, barring some unforeseen circumstances here in the last.
And the Yankees are playing the White Sox, so.
Right. So they're in pretty good shape, but everything else is up in the air. The winner of the Central, the winner of the West, although Seattle's sitting in pretty good position, having swept the Astros in Houston. The math on the Red Sox is pretty straightforward. If they go 3-3, then Cleveland and or Houston have to go 5-1 to knock them out and keep the Red Sox home. So even though the Red Sox are playing two quality teams, the Blue Jays tonight and for the next few nights, and then wrapping up at home with Detroit, I think we can still call Detroit a quality team, despite how poorly they played in September. You still have the specter of Scooble pitching one of those games, so nothing to be taken for granted, and it's going to be fun. I saw some manager, and actually I think it was AJ Hinch, who said, hey, as badly as it's gone for us, if you had said back in spring training that we'd be in first place in the final week and playing the team right behind us for 3 games, we'll take that. And that's where a lot of teams probably fall here. And it'll be fun to see how this unfolds.
Yeah, and I think the thing that hurts the Red Sox a little bit in this picture, we talked as we did big look aheads for the last month about, where are Toronto and Detroit going to be in that last week, and are they going to need to win these games? Or, again, things have changed. It's not the 40-man roster where, I remember a night in Cleveland in 2018 where the Red Sox, who had already won 100 games, had Sam Travis and Zue Lin and you name it on the roster, and William Cuevas starting, and Brian Johnson, all these guys who were not going to be on the playoff roster once the calendar flipped to October. That's not really the case with the 2 extra roster spots. But if you're a team like the Phillies who has it all clinched right now, you could probably give Harper a day off or do whatever they want to do, and however they want to set it up, like teams do in Week 18 in the NFL.
Yeah,
The
I
the
would
Blue
say
Jays,
though, I
yeah, go
would
ahead.
say one thing here is that you used to worry about getting your pitching lined up, but now with the potential for 5 days off for top seed division winners, the notion that you would sit guys in that final series because you want them plenty rested. I think it's now the opposite, where
Mhm.
you want those guys to pitch so that they're not going out and pitching their first postseason game with 10 days rest.
Right.
That's clearly more. It's not as draining on a staff as pitching on short rest, but very few teams would be comfortable having their best starter go for the first time in a week and a half in a must-win situation. So, months ago, we're looking at the standing saying, well, Detroit will have nothing to play for. We found out that's already incorrect. But we were assuming, oh, we won't even see Scooble there because they're going to wrap up and get ready. But I think whether they've clinched anything or not, and it seems likely that they are going to play meaningful games this weekend at Fenway, we're going to see the best that they have because they're not going to have those guys idle for a week and a half.
Right. And my point was Toronto still playing for something with a two-game lead in the East. Detroit very clearly probably still playing for something after the series against Cleveland. So you don't have two teams coasting and doing bullpen games and having guys come up for debuts. You think, last year, again, we saw Quinn Priester in game 162 because why the hell not? Turned out to be his one and only start in a Red Sox uniform. That went great. But, you get the point. It's going to be, uh, kind of the real teams going at it. And, that might hurt the Red Sox a little bit if they were hoping for maybe a reduced version of the Blue Jays or Tigers here down the stretch. I think when you look at the pitching matchups, three really, really good arms, not all in their primes at this point, but Gaussman, Scherzer, and Bieber against Giolito, Crochet, and Bayo. Three good pitching matchups up there. Three guys that, know how to pitch in big games. Obviously, Gaussman has destroyed the Red Sox for years. Bieber's been good since he was acquired there in a trade. Scherzer has had an uneven year, but it's still Max Scherzer, right? So, they're going to have to earn it. It's not, they're not playing two crappy teams down the stretch. They're not playing two teams with nothing to play for. They're going to have to earn it here in a tough road environment for the next three, and then back home for what should be the most meaningful last weekend at Fenway, probably in more than a decade.
Yeah, certainly there's been very little to play for of late. The last few years haven't been to the postseason since 21. In
And
18, they had
in
long ago.
21 they were on the road, and 2018 they were well clinched, right?
Right, right. So there's been very few final series that have had the consequence and impact that these three games against the Tigers are going to have. And but again, I get back to it, and the Red Sox have put themselves in this position. Certainly, they could have benefited from sweeping Tampa Bay and winning Sunday night. That would have uh, given them a big leg up because everybody else of consequence behind them was losing that day, other than Houston, which is basically tied, rather Seattle,
Right.
which is basically tied with the Red Sox. But to go 3-3 over your final six almost certainly gets you in. And that's not when we step back and toss aside pitching matchups and how well they've played against certain teams. To me, if you can't go 3-3, even against good teams in the final week, then you don't deserve to be in.
Right. And I think it also, might come down to like pick your, random game over time in the season that's going to determine that they got in, right? There was a day uh where they played a doubleheader in Cleveland at the end of April and they split, right? Hauk gave it up in the first game. I think Bueller pitched well in the nightcap, and the fact you won that night game is now, the difference that you're going to get into. Like, there's some crazy stuff looking back on these games that you think, are meaningless. They're never meaningless, but they didn't mean much at the time. Now they do.
Now,
With Houston, a three-game sweep at Fenway a couple months ago now looms large, and even though they dropped two out of three down there, so
pick your random loss. How about the Jordan Hicks
right.
debacle after
No,
the
I'm talking
Rays?
about tiebreaker games specifically, but your larger point stands too.
Yeah, right. I mean, because any loss is counting against you and maybe
Yep.
keeping you out of that tiebreaker situation if you had won it. We could easily sit here, even though Aroldis Chapman has been terrific and has only had two blown saves all year. There have been some games that got away from them late, games that they lost on walk-offs in the road in
Hmm.
extra innings.
All
So
the
there
one-run
are any
games in
number of
April and May.
yeah, there are any number of turning point games where we can look back at whatever, they're going to end up with what, 70 something losses. We can all pigeonhole a bunch of them and say that would have made the difference. If they had won that one, they wouldn't be in this position.
Right. And, it's also goes the other way where if, that game against the Angels where Saydon doesn't poke that walk-off home run, then they're tied, right? Like there's just so many things that you look back over the course of the season. And Alex Cora in recent years has liked to say, five pitches go this way, five pitches go that way, five plays go this way, five fielding plays, five, got times you make contact with a runner in scoring position determines the entire season. I think it was kind of BS to talk about the last few years that way because they were not in this mix and they were 81 and 81. If you look at, how far I can look real quick how far they were back last year when the season ended. It was not that close. This year, it actually is. Like those types of, one play here and there determines everything. Red Sox were 13 games back in the East last year and finished 5 games back in the wild card. So it wasn't really that close. But here it is. The one-run games early. Some of the walk-off wins on Friday nights they've had. But like it's just it's crazy almost to think about. We've been living it, the two of us and everybody else who covers the team, and of course all the fans at home for 6 months, and here we are with games to be played. What encouraged you about the weekend in Tampa? I know we talked after the first game on here, and what was kind of disappointing.
Well, I would say through the first two games, they were having better at bats. They were performing better with runners in scoring position, runners on base. They were passing the baton, as Alex Cora likes to say, moving the line, however you want to describe it. They were having better at bats. And then came Sunday, the flip side of that same coin, where they twice leave the bases loaded, where they another time leave two runners on, and they end up stranding, I think, 11. And you can look back and say, boy, a ground ball single, one way or the other, that gets through, gives them the potential for a sweep. I thought that Kyle Harrison's start was highly encouraging. You didn't know what that was going to be, both because it was his
Right.
first one for them and his first time pitching in about a week and a half. They had that weird layoff for him after he makes his Red Sox debut in Sacramento, where you were, pitched well in relief, and then didn't get into a game until he started on Saturday night. So, some ups and downs as you would expect for a team that is kind of played that way for a while, where there are some good things. And if you squint, you can be encouraged by what you're looking at. And at other times, you say, boy, how can they get into the postseason if they can't fix problem X or problem Y? And we saw that kind of writ large in a 3-game series at Steinbrenner Field.
Right. I think, when you're looking at guys we've talked about, Bregman, Rafaela looking better, to me, the most encouraging part of that. Um, you can't expect the guys who are coming up and making their debuts, and we've seen it with Tolley, but now early, to be perfect every time. This is like this should be our new intro, that there's going to be development's not linear and the rise is bumpy and stuff like that, because we talk about it all the time. But the offense was a little bit better. I do think they're up against a big challenge against three really historically good righties here, and Gaussman, Scherzer, or as our friend Johnny Miller used to call him, the Goose Man, Gaussman, Scherzer, and Bieber, and that's going to be kind of a big test. I know you want to
Yeah,
talk
and
about.
I'll be
Go ahead.
interested to see too if because I asked Alex Cora about this Sunday night. He had Willie Abreu as the DH in his return. That did not go particularly well, though.
Hitting
No,
eighth, right?
pardon me.
He's hitting eighth.
Right, but also DHing. And I started thinking, well, okay, they're easing him into this, but do they want a guy who just missed a month with a calf issue to make his return to the outfield on a hard turf surface in Toronto?
Mm-hmm.
And Cora said, that, yeah, that concerns us, but I got to believe he's going to play at least one game in the outfield to get him
Yeah.
acclimated out there. They're running out of time to do that. They clearly want him to be in right field in the postseason. Maybe the occasional lefty will have him sit, but you want to take advantage of his defense. And yet it's going to be a little difficult given his physical situation, to say, okay, go get him, go play right field in the big leagues for the first time in 5 weeks, and to do it on that surface. But as I said, I would think they'd have at least one, if not two games up there. Maybe play him tonight in right field, meaning Tuesday, give Wednesday off and have him DH, and then back in the outfield Thursday. But he's got to get acclimated defensively as well as at the plate.
Yeah, and I think it helps that they had a day off yesterday too. I think my overall thoughts on the Tampa series, they kept their head above water. It's about as I wrote on Thursday as they were heading back out on the road, holding serve. Basically, you need to just kind of hold serve. You don't have to do anything crazy. You go 2-1. They technically lost ground because it went from a game and a half to a game because Cleveland won 3 out of 4. But here you are. You're not tied. You held on to the position the whole week. That's all you need to ask for, and time is running
Take
out for
days
these
off
other
the
clubs.
calendar.
Right, and that's where they are right now. Crochet has been moved in the rotation. This was a development I think they announced Saturday, maybe Sunday. He flip flops with Bayo this week in Toronto and sets up an interesting situation, something we've discussed on the pod a lot for the last week of the regular season and into a week from today, which would be the first wild card game.
Yeah, it would allow him, because he is going Wednesday night, to do so. He'll get an extra day of rest if he goes in, if there is a game one in the wild card round. And meanwhile, he's pitching on regular rest thanks to Monday's off day on Wednesday. They want to get him into a routine. But this is also trying to get a little bounce back and extra recovery time for Brian Bayo, who has not been sharp of late. In three of his last four starts here down the stretch, he's given up multiple runs in either the first or second inning. Made some adjustments as he did last week in the getaway day game before they went on the road to Tampa. But you can't be digging your team a 2 and 3 run hole early on when you get into the postseason. And he's got to turn it around a little bit and pitch better than he has in September. And the same goes for Lucas Giolito, who had a 5 walk game not long ago and called his last outing trash. Um, you know, we spoke and have spoken for a while about the Red Sox being in good position by having a quality trio that they can send out there in a wild card round. The depth obviously has been thinned by injuries with all the guys that are out and not coming back. You're going to rely on some young guys, whether it's Harrison or Early or even Peyton Tolley, although he would have to get built back up. I suspect that we will not see him start again. And if we do, it would be more of a bullpen situation. But the three pitchers that were supposed to be a check mark on the Red Sox side of the ledger as an edge against a lot of teams, maybe not, given how well or how mixed the results have been in September for each of the three. Crochet has been okay, but he has given up 3 or 4 runs in each of the last two starts. A lot of strikeouts, a lot of swing and miss, which is good, but also not executing and leaving some pitches up and giving up home runs.
Yeah, and I think, this also opens up for that May Day scenario on Sunday where he's going to go Wednesday. That's one day short of regular rest. If he can give you 3 innings, 4 innings, I don't think that's off the table. I don't think he'd be
Well, yeah,
unavailable.
if you have to win,
Yeah,
that would be in play, I would think.
and
And
that would not be in play if he was pitching Thursday.
correct. Yeah, and I think that's part of the calculus here.
Right.
And then that puts you in a situation where you either have to win the first two games and move on, or hope that you could bring him back again on short rest, 3 days rest to pitch in game three. As I made this comparison a while ago, Chris, and it's reminding me of 2005, where in the division series against the White Sox, they never got to Kurt Schilling because they needed him on the final weekend.
Hmm.
And they sent out David Wells in the opener and then Matt Clement, and neither of those went well. And it's a team's worst nightmare where you get to the postseason and everybody's all pumped, and then you realize that you exerted so much energy and had to use your best pitchers on the final weekend that they're unavailable now to you in the postseason, which is the risk they run here with Garrett Crochet.
Who's going into game two for you at this moment?
I don't know that it makes all that much difference. They might give the edge to Giolito. He's pitched in the postseason before. He's a veteran, obviously, with far more experience than Bayo. It might be matchups. They might look at a particular lineup, whether it's Seattle, Cleveland, Houston, Detroit, Yankees, whoever. I mean, if it's the Yankees, you would think it would be Bayo, right? Because he has pitched so well, the
Hmm.
last one notwithstanding.
Right.
He's pitched so well historically against the Yankees. You would think they would want him for number two. So I'm sure they're sifting through this, but a lot might be who are they playing?
Right. And how did they get there? And I don't think they've even announced who's going on Friday and Saturday, right?
They haven't. You would expect that it would be early. No, it would probably be Harrison
Harrison
on
and Early.
Friday. He would be pitching on his normal, let's see,
Six.
for he'd
So
have an extra day. You'd have 5 days, and then you come back with early in game 162. But I'm sure if it gets to that, as you noted,
it'll be early. It'll be
golf hands
Harrison,
on
Early,
deck.
Giolito, right? This weekend. Yeah, Giolito will be ready to
I'm
go for
sorry.
Sunday.
Right.
Yeah,
Yep. Yep.
and with that, possibility of Crochet or whatever, it's going to be a fire drill, and it'll be interesting. Well, you were gone. Talked about this a little bit, I think, the other day, but Kristian Campbell was my focus over the weekend. Um, Went to Worcester to talk to him, talked to Craig Breslow about it. We can say pretty much with certainty, unless he is activated this afternoon in a surprise, that the Red Sox sent down Kristian Campbell on June 20th, and he never returned. And to me, that is a surprise considering all the guys that have come up from Eaton to Ali Sanchez. He's gone now. He did win them 3 games, according to Alex Cora, somehow. And Nick Sogard and signing Nate Lowe and all this stuff. My two overriding thoughts: he's still a man without a positional home, and I don't think they made as much progress to that end as they wanted to over the last 3 months. And number two, the game hasn't clicked in all facets to a point where they're comfortable from talking to different people, not being able to hit velocity. He's being able, when he produces, he's been able to hit slop that you see in AAA, the 90-mile-an-hour fastball, the hanging breaking ball, but good breaking balls and velocity, he has not been able to hit. He has struck out way more than they've wanted him to. People look at it, including me when I started out on this, and well, 800 OPS, whatever it is. And that doesn't even start to get into the defensive side of things, which we saw was horrendous at second base in May. And it around the diamond and in the outfield has not gotten much better, clearly, and that's why he has not been called back up. So I think
I,
part of
I
the
also
issue going forward here is that I think in their heart of hearts, the Red Sox have realized that this guy's not an infielder, that he was not able to learn first base on the fly. Clearly, there were some issues there. And that second base, they didn't like what they saw in an extended run. So they want to put him in the outfield, but that's a big issue in this organization when you already have too many outfielders before he even enters the picture. And so I think it's a really, really interesting
and
question heading
and
into the
you've got the
winter.
password as another
Yep.
candidate
Yep.
with a right-handed bat with power.
Hmm.
Remember, particularly if they don't retain Alex Bregman, and that is far from certain.
Yep.
Uh, they're going to need another right-handed bat, and you would think that Garcia's value would increase, which isn't to say that they wouldn't go out and address that with a more major league move, either through free agency or a trade. But in a very left-handed leaning lineup, still there will be the need for the right-handed bat. And how do you know that Garcia isn't the guy that fills that void rather than Kristian Campbell? But I did think it was interesting that Chad Tracy was telling people last week, I see him as put him in the outfield.
Hmm.
Well,
And
easier said than
I've heard that from other people too with the Red Sox. Just thought,
done.
not on the record.
Yeah, it's Funny how quickly things can change. This guy gets a $60 million commitment. He breaks with the team. He's the opening day second baseman. And here it is 5 months later, and his future and where he fits long term is still very much up in the air.
Yeah, and like this is a Red Sox team all year that has just done the we're going all in thing for like 4 or 5 months now, right? Like they trade Rafi, as bold of a move as you could possibly imagine. We're not going to cover that for the 80th straight podcast, but Tolley comes up, Early comes up, Harrison's pitching important games down the stretch. Roman came up as soon as there was a need. Marcelo came up as soon as there was a need. Campbell, even in the first iteration, comes up, and it's just bold moves and bold strokes and short term over long term. And Campbell doesn't get called back up. I think it says a lot.
Yeah. Well, there's not a great fit. And frankly, as you said, he didn't exactly force their hand. He did better offensively at AAA, but he didn't kick that door down. He kind of knocked on it gently, and he didn't make them make room for him.
Yeah, and I think it's my two final thoughts on this. Number one, like talking to him the other day, reminded he's a great personality and really nice guy, and like you kind of want him to succeed. And I don't think it was. I think he's come to peace with. All right, he called it his second redshirt season. He redshirted at Georgia Tech a few years ago, and so I think he's come to terms with. All right, I'm 23. It is what it is. Still, made the majors, had some success. Obviously, signed the extension. The other part of this that I can't stand already on Twitter and everything else is people talking about the contract as a horrible decision because under no circumstances for a big market team can an extension of that size ever be a bad decision. The CBT hit on that is going to be 7.5 million, which is a middle reliever at this point. So it's all upside, no downside. When you have a $250 million payroll, that 7.5 is not much. I've argued this with Rafaela, with Bayo. I don't think Anthony's going to be a worry if that's an overpay for sure. But some of these deals that we've seen, the pre-arb deals, Whitlock, whatever it is, like if it's all risk for the player, all
Right.
upside for the team.
Look, of the guys on the major league roster who signed extensions, the worst, I'm using air quotes, deal right now is Rafaelis, right?
Yeah.
We would agree if you take
Yep.
Campbell out of the equation. Would you pay, you know, again, $7, $8 million for a gold glove outfielder who can hit close to 20 home runs a year
Hmm.
in a heartbeat?
Yeah.
So that's further evidence of your point
And
that
look at how much of a bargain Bayo's season is when you put it in those terms, right?
sure, right.
You know,
And Roman's
and
future
Whitlock.
seasons are probably going to be ridiculously good bargains for the Red Sox, not
Yeah.
just good ones.
And you can't ever look at these deals based on I'm sure Campbell's is like he makes 1 million now, and then it goes to 5, and then it goes to 12. That doesn't matter really to anybody except the Red Sox accounting department. It doesn't matter how you can build your team. It's all about the CBT hit, which is the whole point of these deals where you're able to spread it out based on the average annual value. That'll be 7.5 when Campbell's making 1 million. It'll be 7.5 when Campbell's making 20 million. Same with Anthony's deal and Bayo and Rafaela and Crochet and all these other guys that have signed. That's just how it works. It does not do anything for them financially. They are not going to release Kristian Campbell this offseason. And I think there's a chance they could trade him. I just because there's and there's a lot of pieces to be figured out.
I would think they would not want to do that with his
Right.
value having cratered a little bit here, but it can't be entirely dismissed as a possibility.
But my point was, even if they did release him and they pay that 7.5 every, like it's not that much money to them. Really, the reality of the situation.
Yep.
So Toronto is where they'll start tonight. Chris Smith is there. Plenty of coverage, I'm sure. 10 posts a night for the next 3 from Smitty. We'll be back later in the week with another pod to wrap up that series and look on to Detroit. But it's crunch time for the Red Sox and on the Fenway Rundown.